We're going to start with an image. It's a photograph of a hand, but not like any photograph you've ever seen. See the bones inside, the knuckles, the joints, and a dark shadow where a wedding ring sits.
And the woman whose hand that was, Bertha, she looked at this image her husband had created, and she said something just chilling.
She said, "I saw my death."
I saw my death. And in that moment, she wasn't being dramatic. She was looking at the internal structure of a living person, her own, for the very first time in history.
Which brings us to the big question. How is that even possible? How do you see bones on a piece of paper without an operation, without a scalpel?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
Welcome to our deep dive on the discovery of X-rays. We're going to trace the steps, the dates, and the incredible consequences of one night in a lab that literally opened a door to seeing inside the human body.
And it all starts not with a grand plan, but with a scientist who simply refused to ignore something that didn't make sense.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's late in the evening, November 8, 1895. We're in Würzburg, Germany.
And inside the Physical Institute of the university, Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen is working. And he's working alone.
Now, he wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary, not for a physicist at the time. He was running these fairly routine experiments.
Right, passing an electric discharge through different kinds of vacuum tubes. That's pretty standard stuff, looking at how energy and light behave in a controlled space. It sounds a bit monotonous, actually.
But here's the crucial thing about Röntgen, the thing you have to understand. He had this habit, this scientific integrity. He would not tolerate what he called unexplained trifles.
Yeah, if something behaved strangely, that wasn't just noise or an error to him.
It was a signal. It was a hint that something else was going on.
And that night, a signal definitely arrived. He's in the lab, and to do his experiment properly, he needs total darkness.
So he darkens the room, and he takes the discharge tube and covers it with thick black cardboard. He wants to make absolutely sure that no visible light can get out.
The room should have been pitch black. That was the whole point.
But it wasn't. Some distance away, on a lab bench, a fluorescent screen he had nearby started to glow.
Just a faint, subtle, greenish glow. But if you're Röntgen, standing there in what should be a completely dark room, that screen simply cannot be glowing.
He knew instantly. Whatever was making that screen light up was not normal light.
It had to be something invisible, something that was leaving the covered tube, passing through the cardboard barrier, and hitting that screen.
This is the pivot point. This isn't an accident he cleans up. It's a new phenomenon.
And what's so fascinating is what he does next. He doesn't, run out and call the newspapers.
No, he locks himself in the lab for weeks. His first goal isn't even to figure out what this new ray is. It's to figure out what it does.
He begins this incredibly systematic, almost cold and calculated series of tests.
The first big question being, what can stop it? So he starts putting different things between the tube and the screen.
He starts with the simple things. A piece of paper.
The glow is still there.
A thicker piece of wood. A whole book.
Still there. These rays are just pushing right through.
But then he moves on to denser materials. A thin sheet of metal.
And now, finally, he sees a shadow. The glow diminishes. This is the key.
It is the key, because it tells him that the rays are being absorbed or blocked based on the material's density.
It's like a superpowered flashlight. A piece of paper won't stop the beam, but a brick wall will.
Exactly. And Röntgen has this incredible intuitive leap. He realizes that if these rays can tell the difference between wood and metal,
then they must be able to tell the difference between the tissues in the human body.
Right. Between skin and muscle and cartilage and, of course, the densest part of all, bone.
And since he had no idea what this force was, it wasn't like any known wave or particle, he gave it a name that signaled his humility.
He called it X, a mathematical symbol for an unknown quantity.
X-rays. And that's what we still call them.
Yeah.
He wasn't making a grand claim. He was just stating a fact. I found something, and I don't know what it is yet.
But before he tested it on a person, he needed more proof. The first images he took weren't of hands. They were these shadowy radiographs of things like metal keys and gears.
To prove he could reveal the hidden internal structure of an object.
And once he'd proven that, that's when the tension really ramps up. Because in 1895, no one knows anything about radiation. Nothing.
And yet he sees the potential to see bone without surgery.
Wow.
It's a revolution waiting to happen. So he turns to the most trusted person he knows.
His wife, Bertha Röntgen, he asks her to participate in this experiment.
Can you just imagine that conversation? He's asking her to place her hand in the path of a completely unknown and invisible force.
And we have to remember, this wasn't like getting an X-ray today. It wasn't a quick snapshot. The exposure was long. She had to hold her hand perfectly still for quite some time.
The result, though, is that iconic image, the hand-met ring.
Hand with ring. It's so clear. You can see the faint outline of her flesh, then the detailed structure of her finger bones, and then that stark, dark shadow of the wedding ring.
The densest object on her hand, casting the darkest shadow. It proved his theory perfectly.
But her reaction is what's so powerful. I saw my death. She's not just looking at a medical marvel.
No, she's having this profound psychological shock. She's seeing herself as a skeleton.
Which, until that moment, was something you only saw in the deceased. It's this realization that under our skin, we're all just this fragile architecture of bone. It was an existential moment.
And that existential shock immediately translated into a global revolution. Because you didn't need to be a physicist to understand the value of that image.
Not at all. Any doctor, any surgeon could look at that and immediately see the potential. If you can see a broken bone.
You can set it perfectly. If you can see a bullet or shrapnel inside a soldier.
You know exactly where to operate. The whole logic of diagnostics just flipped overnight.
It went from assuming, from feeling and guessing, to confirming, to seeing. Röntgenography became an essential tool almost instantly.
But that explosive fascination came with a dark side. A really sobering realization.
The miracle had a cost, and nobody knew it at first.
Absolutely not. In the early days, X-rays were a sensation. People held public demonstrations, researchers were exposing themselves over and over again. There was no concept of dose or danger.
And that led to, well, horrible consequences. Early pioneers started getting severe radiation burns, terrible skin damage.
It was a very hard, very painful lesson. The vision was a miracle, but the power behind it required discipline.
Which is how the entire field of radiation safety was born. It wasn't an academic exercise, it was an urgent response to real harm.
Exactly. That's when you start seeing the development of lead aprons, of shielding in the walls, of methods for dose control, and a huge push to make exposure times shorter.
Science had to grow up fast to safely handle the power it had just unlocked.
It's a classic case of technology outpacing the understanding of its risks.
And when you look at Röntgen himself, his own actions after the discovery are just a masterclass in scientific integrity.
He was so meticulous. He waits almost 2 months after the discovery on November 8th before he's ready to publish. He needs to be absolutely sure.
And then on December 28th, 1895, he sends out his paper. The formal title was Über eine neue Art von Strahlen.
On a new kind of ray.
And the world took notice. The recognition was swift, and it was huge. By 1901, he's awarded the very first Nobel Prize in physics.
But even with that incredible honor, he was still the same private, reserved scientist. He actually refused to deliver the traditional Nobel lecture.
He just wanted the work to speak for itself. He wasn't a showman.
And this next part, I think, is maybe the most important part of his legacy. He made a decision about the technology itself.
The money.
The money. He made the conscious, deliberate choice to refuse to patent his discovery.
Which is just staggering. He could have been one of the wealthiest men in the world.
Easily. But he believed that its benefit to medicine was so great that it needed to be freely available to everyone for the public good. No commercial restrictions, no licensing fees.
And that single decision is why X-ray technology spread so quickly around the globe. He basically gave this gift to humanity.
So you have the whole arc. A tiny, unexplained glow in a dark room.
Leads to this existential shock for his wife.
Which transforms medicine, creates a new scientific discipline of safety, and is then given freely to the world because of one man's integrity.
It's incredible. The ability we have today to diagnose a tumor, to check on an unborn child, to set a fracture, it all traces back to that greenish glow.
It really does.
So when you think about it, what does this all mean for us now? I think we often believe that big breakthroughs come from these huge targeted projects.
The big missions, the giant budget.
Right. But Röntgen's story tells us something different. It tells us that sometimes progress starts much smaller. It starts with the discipline and the simple curiosity to just pause, dim the lights, and ask a very simple question.
Why is that little thing over there glowing when it really, really shouldn't be?